Welcome, everyone. This is Bob Wurzelbacher. I am the director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our podcast video series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we'll discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena, and we'll hear the personal story of someone who was deeply affected by that issue, and then we'll let you know how you can get involved. This month's topic is undocumented immigrants. As always, we have a special guest with us today. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jose Arnulfo Cabrera. I am the Immigration Program Organizer at the Intercommunity Justice and Peace Center, and I'm a recent graduate from Xavier University.
Welcome, Jose. Now, Jose was brought here by his parents when he was only 4 years old. So, Jose, take us back and tell us that story of how you came here to the United States.
So, I was born dirt poor on a dirt floor. I lived in a small shack with aluminum walls and aluminum roof. No running water, no electricity, a bed and a bucket. So when I was 4 years old, my parents decided to come to the United States. My father told my mom that not only would I get an education in the United States, but I would also get better health care and I would have more opportunities that I could never obtain in Mexico. Because I was so young at the time and my parents were so poor that they couldn't afford a visa to enter the United States, they had to cross the border without inspection. And the coyote, a man that brings people across the border, told my parents that he had a son who was about my age and that if he had paid them a little bit more money, that he could get me across through the Mexican-US border in Nogales, and he would say that I was his son. And I would go like any other U.S. citizen who was in Mexico going back to the United States would go. While my parents had to cross the border, they thought that it would take them 2 days to cross, but it ended up taking 4 days and 3 nights. And in that time period, I was in a hotel room with a complete stranger that I had never met, and also a complete stranger that my parents didn't fully know and know what he could have done. But for them, it was the only way for them to get into this country so I can get an education.
I mean, I can barely imagine the worry and heartbreak it would take for parents of a 4-year-old child to put the child in the hands of a complete stranger to take over the border of a country in order to cross over in a different way. The desperation that they must have felt in order to feel this is the only possible way to have some kind of a life for this family.
I mean, like I said, we were very poor and there was literally no opportunities for me in Mexico. And my father actually, when I was 4 months old, he'd come to the United States with the intention of working really hard and sending a lot of money back home to then eventually buy a house, buy some land, and start a business that he can come back to and live this happily ever after. But, you know, life is messy and that really didn't work out. So when he came back when I was 4 years old, he told my mom the opportunities living in the U.S. are endless. And so every parent wants their child to live a better life. And so that's what they were doing. They did what they needed to do to make sure that I had every opportunity possible for me.
And coming over as a documented immigrant was not in the realm of possibility for your parents.
No, because in order for you to get a simple visitor visa to the United States from Mexico, you have to have a certain amount of money in the bank. You have to own property or own land. You have to have something that's holding you back to Mexico that will ensure the United States that you are going to come back to Mexico and not overstay your visa. And so what a lot of times people do is on paper, they have all that ready, but they're slowly selling it off because the cost of obtaining a visa and all the costs to get that visa, of the trip you have to take to the capital if you're not from the capital, the amount of time you have to wait, and that also includes paying for hotels, paying for meals, and however long it takes, then paying for the actual visa itself, paying for the plane tickets, just so you can come to the United States. And my family, who was dirt poor, they didn't have that. So they had to do it in a different way.
So can you tell me a little bit more about the journey your parents took, what they might have told you about how dangerous it was?
Right. So it actually took them 4 days and 3 nights just to get across. My mom would talk about how while they were crossing, they were actually detained by the Border Patrol, and they were waiting to take them, book them, get their fingerprints, get their ID, but his shift was ending. So he decided to drop them off on the Mexican side and told them, look, just keep walking that direction and you'll be back to your native country. And so right when they could not see his truck, they just turned around and followed the direction the truck was going, and they tried to cross again. Then they were picked up again by the coyotes, and the coyotes again was taking them across. But my mom said that when they heard the siren of the Border Patrol, she jumped out of the truck and pulled my father along. And then the other guys who were following them jumped out along with them, and they ran off and hid under cactuses because they knew that the border agents wouldn't chase them in the field of the cactus. So they would sleep there and stay there for days trying to hide from cactus. She mentioned one day they were resting under a tree, and when she opened her eyes, there was a rattlesnake right in front of her.
Oh,
And, it's 4 days and 3 nights, no food, no water, crossing the desert that is known for its many deaths, for very unhumane conditions that most of the time border agents spent their time collecting bodies rather than trying to stop migrants from crossing.
right. And all this time, of course, your parents know that they have a 4-year-old son who was brought over, and they have to find a way to get over now to be reunited with you.
Right. And this is actually one of my favorite parts when my mom shares the story. She talks about an incident where my father wanted to quit and wanted to go back and said that it was too hard. And he said, we'll pay for the boy to come back and we'll try our luck some other time. And so my mother, she said, you know what? You guys can go back, but my son's on the other side of that wall, and I'm going to cross whether you follow me or not. And she was very stubborn, and she said she'd continue walking until the guys decided, what the heck, we'll just follow her. And it was just a moment where she showed she wasn't going to let anything stop her from getting to her son.
Right. It's hard for me to imagine, but I suppose if a parent is in a situation of knowing how difficult and arduous the journey will be with no food, no water, rattlesnakes running around in the desert, people that you have to worry about actually harming you as well, and having to choose between taking your child through that and hope for the best versus bringing your child safely into the country and hoping to reunite with them later is considered a better option. You just have to be really desperate, I guess, to do that.
And I want to say too, we talked about yesterday of the young boy, the book Enrique's Journey.
Yes.
The Bestia. Well, I remember hearing one person says that it is not unusual for someone that when they started their journey beginning with the Bestia and ended their journey with the Bestia, they've lost some body part.
Right. Jose, by the way, is talking about, there's a book called Enrique's Journey. And you go to your library or go to your favorite bookstore. I've read that book myself. It's an incredible tale of a young person making his own journey all the way across a couple of country borders and all the way through Mexico to make it into the United States in order to be reunited with his mother, who went there by herself in order to send back money to him in his home country, and did not want to live, I guess, without his mother anymore, and so did that journey as a very young person by himself. It's a harrowing story.
Most kids, that's what they're doing now. Yeah.
Things have to be so desperate and bad where you're living to want to be willing to take a journey like that. So I recommend that for some reading as well to help get an understanding of the mindset and the difficulty of some people's situations, which causes them to make the decision to go on this journey.
Right.
That leads them and their children in an undocumented status in the United States. Okay, so they make their way to the United States. They are reunited with you in the hotel room in Arizona. Right. Okay, so then what happens from there with your family?
So we moved to North Carolina, where my father's brother was living at the time. And we lived there for a while until my father was able to pick up a job in construction and was making enough where he could rent out a trailer. And then he was offered a job working at Paul Brown Stadium. And at the time, it was a 10-hour drive from Cincinnati to North Carolina. And my mom had just given birth to my youngest sister, Esther, who was the first U.S. citizen in both sides of the family. And so he decided that instead of driving 10 hours every weekend to see my family, I'm just going to relocate everyone to Cincinnati. And so we kind of settled here, and we've been here ever since. That quickly turned to me turning 5 years old and starting kindergarten. My teacher requested a parent-teacher conference with my parents and told them that she wanted my parents to get me tested to see if I had any learning disabilities. So my parents took me to Children's Hospital, and the more tests I had to take, the more problems I had and the more therapists I needed to address the many learning disabilities that I had. And that wasn't part of the plan of him getting an education and me eventually becoming someone. And that inadvertently led my father to develop a drinking habit and a drug habit, to where he would beat me and my mom on a regular basis. And this continued on until I was 8 years old, when he finally left the house and left me, my mom, and my two younger sisters, Esther and Karina, the youngest, the baby of the family. She was born in Cincinnati. From the moment we came to this country to the moment my father left, my mother had never left the kitchen. My mother was raised that her duty in life was to be a good housewife. And when she ended the 6th grade in Mexico, my grandfather took her out, told her that she wasn't going to continue her education and that she had to focus on the duties of the house so she could be a good housewife. And at the time, my grandfather thought that that would put her in a better position than getting an education. And unfortunately, because of that, she was undocumented, raising 3 kids by herself. She couldn't read or write in English. She couldn't drive, and she didn't know where to pay bills. She didn't know how to pay them, and she wasn't able to get a job. And so we were evicted from our home, and we became homeless for some time.
So your mother is now living in the United States. She's an undocumented immigrant. She has an 8-year-old son. She has 2 young daughters who are U.S. citizens, but she has no job skills because she was raised to be a homemaker. Even if she did have outside skills, she, as an undocumented immigrant, doesn't have much opportunity to find a job to use them. And now she's a single mom trying to raise 3 children. Where did your father just left? Where did he go? Do you know?
Yeah, he just left.
Okay. So what did your mother do then at that point?
So she spent her weekend selling traditional Mexican food to construction workers who would have to work outside of the state and would be away for a week to 2 weeks at a job site. And on the weekdays, she would sell beauty projects, so like perfumes, face creams, and stuff like that. And she did that until she was able to save enough money to put down a deposit for a small 1-bedroom apartment in Evanston. And if you're not from Cincinnati or don't know the area very well, Evanston is known as one of the roughest neighborhoods in Cincinnati. Right. And so from a young age, I was exposed to gangs, gang violence, drugs, and different rough situations that are normally found in the ghetto. And my mom was able to get a job cleaning houses and then another job busting tables at a restaurant. And we would see her for maybe 2 to 3 hours a day. She would wake up early. She would get us ready for the school bus, drop us off, and then go to her first job. Then she would come home around the same time we were coming home from school. She fed us, she ate, and then she went to her second job and was coming home around 1 or 2 in the morning.
And who was taking care of you when she was at work and you were not in school?
Well, it ended up landing on me because babysitter is very expensive. And because of her immigration status, she couldn't get a job that would give her a living wage. So she was barely able to make ends meet and to pay all her bills on time. So I was the 8-year-old taking care of my little sisters.
Wow. Now, you said she saved up enough money to pay for a 1-bedroom apartment. Where were you living before that?
We were couch surfing, which meant that we would stay at family and friends' home for a little bit, and we would keep doing that, randomly.
Your mother sounds like an incredible, strong, seriously, strong, brave, determined woman. She really does.
Yeah, she is.
So this is your life, basically, through grade school, and so she worked to raise you And then, so now you're growing up, you're in high school, and now you start thinking about your future. You're realizing what your status, I guess, if you will.
Not yet.
Okay.
Because I started off my freshman year of high school unable to read or write and unable to do basic math. My whole life, there was so much going on that it was very hard for me to pay attention in school. And so I was also getting involved with the wrong crowd. And I started off in high school with this kind of label as a kid who wouldn't graduate, who would probably drop out his sophomore year, and someone who teachers just decided to write him off because they had 30 kids, and either trying to focus on the kid who was so far behind and hanging around the wrong crowd, it didn't make sense to put enough energy. So teachers were kind of writing me off. But I was in the Big Brother and Big Sisters program. Okay. And my big brother, David, he likes to say that he put a book in front of me to read, and it took me a minute or even longer to read the first sentence. And that was with either him giving me the words or having to correct me on the words. He decided to help my mom and to understand what situation they can do to help me improve my education. Normally, a big brother in the Big Brother and Big Sisters program, would take you out and do fun things, but we were always in a coffee shop or a library or his house and just doing the very basics and trying to catch up to my peers until I was able to make first honors all 4 semesters and graduated with a 3.6 GPA, and then was accepted to Xavier and received so many academic scholarships because I worked really hard and tried to improve my education that I pretty much was on a full ride at Xavier.
Wow. So you enter your freshman year of high school unable to read
or write and basic math.
Unable to read or write or do basic math. And by your senior year, you are an honors student.
Mm-hmm.
And now, do you remember your attitude? Did your big brother, David, mm-hmm. did he help you change your attitude, or was your attitude eager from the start with your relationship with David?
When I was about in the 7th grade, when mom realized the kind of crowd I was hanging around with and how I was starting to get in trouble, she quit one of her 2 jobs and she devoted herself to community organizing. And she, along with one of our good family friends, helped start the Cincinnati Interfaith Worker Center. It's actually right down the hall from IJPC. And it felt like every weekend I was listening to my mom share her story of crossing the border. And the part where she talked about how my father wanted to give up and she said, no, I'm going to keep walking. She would tie it back to how her current situation was at the time and say how she keeps fighting because she came to this country with the goal of making sure her son got a good education so he could become a someone. And I had to hear that story multiple times over and over again. And it was like, what are you doing with your life? Look at what your mother has given up and has done so much for you. And it really made me feel ashamed of myself. And even when I felt like, you know what, that's it, I have to stop, I have to improve, every weekend I was hearing that story as a way of kind of reminding me of to push harder and harder. And, David also showed me a world that I never knew of. He lived in a pretty nice and high middle class area in Hyde Park. And I remember going to his home for the first time, and it was such a weird place. The grass was so much greener. Everyone was happy. People were jogging. I remember the main thing that threw me off was we got to his house, he walked out of his car and he didn't lock it. And in my neighborhood, if you didn't lock your car, it was just so bizarre. And his life did not fit and was never given to me or allowed for me to even envision because of the situations I grew up, being born dirt poor and then living in one of the toughest neighborhoods in Cincinnati. It wasn't my reality, and it never was until he came along and he offered that to me. This could be your life, but you have to work hard for it. You have to spend a lot of time studying it and trying to catch up with your peers.
Wow. So it sounds like David was a very powerful influence in your life as well.
And to this day, he is.
Right. So good job to big brothers and big sisters.
I owe them a lot.
Right. Okay, so you went from a very challenging start to high school to working very hard and doing well by your senior year. You have scholarships locally to Xavier University here. Tell me a little bit about how you're still undocumented, right? Or now you can do that only because of certain laws that were in place by then.
Yeah, so I have DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. It was an executive order by President Obama in 2012 that it would grant a work visa for undocumented youth who were brought to the United States before they were 16, who entered the United States before June 15 of 2007 and have been present for consecutive years, and was also president June 15 of 2012 when President Obama gave the executive order, don't have a felony or more than 2 misdemeanors, and are in school going into higher education or into a 2-year trade school. So as long as you fit that criteria, you qualify for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And right off the bat, if you got it, you were protected from deportation. Once you fill out all of the paperwork, and they are long, there are 3 different forms that you have to fill out, giving very detailed information about you. One of the hardest part is proving that you've lived here consecutively. So that means you have to have doctor appointments, bills, school records, anything that can date farther back that's also official documents since past 2007, June 15, 2007, then you're fine. And so let me ask you, do you still have your doctor's receipt or medical bill past June 15, 2007?
I do believe in my case, my mother did a very good job of keeping all those records. But
well, you and me are the lucky ones because
right.
My mother kept all of those records.
Right.
But not everyone is like that.
I'm sure. You know? I have no doubt a lot of people.
Yeah, and so a lot of people struggle with that. And as well as you have to give all of the addresses you lived in the United States. And you have to give the exact date you entered the United States with those addresses. And those addresses have to be a date apart. If they're like a week apart, the government has to say, where were you living in that 1 week?
Wow.
They're very specific. And so once you fill out the paperwork, you send it out with a $500 money order to the U.S. government, and then they review it. And if you get it, then you have to get your fingerprint. They put in your name in all different forms of databases, and they do a very extensive background check along with your fingerprints. And once you pass all those different background checks, then you are giving a work visa with a social security card that in big black letters on top of it says, not valid for re-entry in the United States. And you have that for 2 years. After those 2 years, you can renew it, sending all those forms and going through all that process again, along with another $500 check. You can keep having a worker permit until whenever. And you also have to be between the ages 16 to 31. You can't be older than that.
Okay. That says a lot. I didn't know all that. A lot of people, I think, even people who do not empathize with being brought here to the United States as a child, where you didn't even have any control of that, even if they don't empathize with that part of the story, they still might believe that, oh, they're just handing out these work visas to anybody who wants to walk up to the desk and say, oh, I was brought here. But there are many things that you have to provide, addresses and medical records and criminal records or police records or any, that not everybody is, not most perhaps even, are going to be able to qualify for, in addition to the $500, which is going to be hard to come up with if you can't get a job under normal circumstances. And
also, unfortunately, when most of the time, the way the family structures are built, the older generation are undocumented or have some weird immigration status, and the younger generation are U.S. citizens. And so in my case, where I'm the only one who, until now, because now Esther, the middle, is 18, and the youngest actually just got her first job, and she's 16, I'm the only one who has a stable job because I have documentations, and I'm the only one who's able to drive. And so I'm also, in a lot of cases, the ones who are making the most money in the house. And so a large portion of their paycheck is going towards paying bills and paying all of the expenses.
So because of DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, you're able to attend Xavier University.
Well, I was always able to attend. When I was in 7th grade, I met a young woman who was undocumented and was attending Xavier University. And for private universities, it's a lot easier, and they're able to give a lot more financial aid for undocumented folks versus public universities. But it's a fuzzy area because DACA recipients were able to qualify for more scholarship opportunities that were given to Latino or immigrants who have some form of status. And so that allowed them to pay for college. But as long as their university did not have a policy where they denied acceptance to undocumented immigrants, they could attend college. And many have.
Okay. Without DACA, graduating from high school, what do you think would have happened to you?
If I was from some miraculous way still able to have all the scholarships that I was given when I graduated, I would have been able to attend college, but it would have been a lot more difficult than it was with my DACA. But then the problem would have been around this time when after graduation, where I would have to go back into like my uncles and construction workers or cleaning houses, which are noble jobs, but I wouldn't be pursuing what I studied for and what I went to college for 4 years.
Right. So DACA gave you both the ability to work while you're in school, perhaps, to help pay for your education, help your family out, those sorts of things, as well as give you the opportunity to work in the field that you're studying for. That's what DACA.
Exactly. And some fields have policies that prevent DACA recipients from working. In some states, they have created policies that if you have DACA, you can't be a nurse or you can't be a firefighter. Whereas as long as you live in Ohio, you're able to do that and you're able to become a nurse. But depending on the states, you have to deal with federal legislation and federal policy and laws, and then you have to deal with state policies and laws.
So what are you studying, Jose?
I graduated with a degree in entrepreneurship with a minor in justice and peace studies.
Okay. What are your plans with that right now?
So I'm actually going to be moving to DC. I have a year-long internship as the government relations associate.
Now, is any of that being or going to be affected by what's happening with the expiration of DACA?
It would all be, because depending on where that stands, either I will lose my DACA and won't be allowed to renew, which my renew date is coming at the end of the summer. I have to renew my DACA. I would only have my DACA until, I believe, January 23 of 2019. But if I'm able to renew it, I will have it for another 2 years.
Okay.
And you have to, and here's another thing that I forgot. You have to renew 120 to 150 days before your renewal date.
So you have to renew in September, October.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to get all my paperwork done and finalized and ready to send by the end of the summer.
Right. Now, people right now who are like you, but whose DACA current 2-year status expired June 1st or something, where are they right now? Are they back to having to live in shadows?
So at the moment, if you have DACA, go and renew your DACA. If you are new and you just turned 16 and you qualified with all the different qualifications, you can't apply for DACA. They are not accepting new applicants. They're only renewing at right now.
Okay. Right now, people cannot apply, but you can renew still at this moment. And of course, we are speaking in May. And at this moment, we don't know what the status is going to be at the time that you even want to renew, for that matter.
No, we will have some form of idea what is going to happen at least until August or maybe September.
Right. And if it does not get renewed, then your plans going to DC and the work you're doing there, that all goes away.
Essentially, it will go away.
Right.
Especially because mine is a paid internship.
And you can't get a work visa as an undocumented immigrant except through the DACA program.
Yes.
Right. Now, what if someone were to say to you, Jose, just do what you need to do to become a citizen instead of expecting the government to hand you citizenship? What's your response to that?
Are you willing to marry me?
Okay,
And
that
are
would
you
be
a
one
U.S.
way.
citizen?
Okay. Was that
Are
no?
you a
Really?
U.S.
What else?
Yeah.
What's your other option?
Are you willing to beat me up so I can file a police report and hopefully be eligible to obtain a U visa?
What is that?
A U visa is a visa for someone who is a victim of a crime, and it has to be a really bad crime. Like if you got mugged, it necessarily doesn't guarantee you a U visa. If you got mugged and were left for dead, then possibly.
So, are those the only two options? Are there other options?
There's also the T visa if I was a victim of human trafficking, that thankfully I am not. So I don't qualify for that. There is I forget the actual name, but it's for people who suffer from domestic violence, but your abuser has to be a U.S. citizen. And so you could argue that I suffered from domestic violence when I was living with my father when I was 8 years old. My father wasn't a U.S. citizen,
Right.
so I wouldn't qualify. And other than that, there is no option. And that's what this whole movement is about, because there is no way for me to, quote, wait in line.
There's no line for you to wait in the first place. And so
Yes.
what we're asking for is you're asking for a line, you might even say.
Yes. And even a lot of people think, passing the DREAM Act or getting comprehensive immigration reform passed is amnesty. Well, first of all, amnesty was passed in the Reagan era back in the 80s. It was the Immigration Control Act, and hundreds and hundreds of undocumented immigrants received a pathway to citizenship. And even that was not a clear pathway. There were requirements like DACA. They had to pay fines and fees. They had to get lawyers to help them fill out the documentation. And then once everything was approved, they were then given temporary either visa or residency to then see if they can qualify for a permanent residency status. And then once they have permanent residency, they have to wait for 5 years in order to apply for U.S. citizenship. And that's what the DREAM Act, or even if we were to get comprehensive immigration reform in Congress for a vote, that's what we're asking for. The DREAM Act would actually, I will get temporary residency for about 6 years. And what the DREAM Act allows is how many years I had with DACA, they could transfer over to the temporary residency. So let's say I had 5 years with my DACA, then I would just only have to have a year with temporary residency, and then I would have to apply for permanent residency. And if I was accepted, then I have to wait for 5 years to then apply for U.S. citizenship.
So it's still a much longer process than people seem to think.
It is a very long process. You're looking at a minimum of 10 to 15 years.
10 to 15 years.
And that's if you get all your paperwork correctly. What people don't understand is the majority of the folks who came to this country overstayed their visas or had some form of status that were lost because they were misled by a bad immigration lawyer.
Did you just say that most undocumented immigrants in this country today came here documented, but their visas are just expired?
Their visas expired because once they got here, they either had a lawyer who mistreated their case, who didn't know how to get them documentation or a pathway to citizenship, or there was no opportunities for them to live in the United States.
And many of them were misinformed before coming by a lawyer who was either incompetent or perhaps unethical.
It's the same way how we have deported veterans in the United States. Most people think that if you join the Army, that you get citizenship right away. That is actually a big myth. In some cases, what recruiters would end up doing is they help someone get big documentations so they can sign them up for the Army. And they say, well, once you're in the Army, then you tell us that you're undocumented and we can get you documentation. It doesn't work like that. You have to be a permanent residency status. And then once you serve, instead of waiting 5 years, you may have to just wait 2 years. Right. Or you might get a citizenship right after you've done your tour. And that's the same thing. Lawyers or people trying to get more people to come to the United States mislead people in different parts of the world of what the immigration system is. Even when they're here, when DACA came out, there was a lot of lawyers and notaries as well saying, give me $1,000 and I'll get you your DACA. Right, like that.
Right.
Give me $1,000 and you'll have DACA for 2 years, and then I'll get you U.S. citizenship the next year.
And that obviously is not true.
Yeah, and people know that a lot of the folks coming here, they're working 2 dead-end jobs. They can barely make ends meet because they don't have the proper documentations to get a stable job, that they don't have that much money, and they aren't able to spend enough time researching the law or even taking the classes to read and write in English and learn English to know that someone's scamming you.
So if DACA expires and nothing happens with it, you would be someone who was brought here as a child to the United States, who's worked very hard trying to do something with your life, going to school, contribute to society, and you wouldn't be able to because you would have to go into the life that your mother had, that your father had, of just taking whatever kind of unskilled labor someone would be willing to give to you and pay you under the table with. That would become your life. Is that right?
Yes.
To someone who would say, well, you should just go back to your home country. You were 4 years old. Nonetheless, what would you say to them about that? Just go back to your home country. You're not from here.
I am from here. I don't know anything about my own country. I can't tell you the Pledge of Allegiance from Mexico. I know how the song of the national anthem from Mexico just because I watch, Mexican soccer, but I know America's by heart. Actually, if my name is in it, Jose, can you sing? So, I grew up my whole life here. And I think people think that's an easy solution, but you see, this movement is about we're just as Americans. We moved to this country and we've lived here for so long. We actually have assimilated to this culture. It might not be your exact way because we come from different cultures and different backgrounds, but we have assimilated to this country, and we started families, and we have kids who this is their country. And our country has always had this idea that because maybe you don't look of the same skin color, and what we're trying to fight for is for everyone to understand and give us that right that we had, and to treat us like human beings. Because being undocumented or even having DACA, you're a second-class citizen. And you pay taxes, you work hard, and you do everything you can to make this country the best country it possibly can be, but you're not able to fully participate in democracy. And that's not the American way. Because I am an American and I've been assimilated, I've learned that the American way is you roll up your sleeves and you fight the long fight to get what you deserve as an American.
Right. So if somebody hears this story and they want to get involved and they want to help, what can we do?
At the moment, the best thing you can do is figure out where in your city or your state there is a organization or a group of people that are willing to go into your own community, into your own church, and educate them about our broken immigration system. So if you're from Cincinnati and you live in Cincinnati, IGPC is the best resource you can, because we have different programs that we can go into churches, into any community or base, and we educate them on our current immigration systems and why people can't, quote, get in line, and what this whole movement is really about. So that's the biggest one, to stay educated and to get educated.
Let's stop for a second. So IJPC, that's Intercommunity Justice and Peace Center. Let me take a moment, and that's a website. If you're listening on the podcast, you can't see this, but the Intercommunity Justice and Peace Center is ijpccincinnati.org, and you can go there, and I'm going to show that on the screen for a second. So you can go to this website at ijpccincinnati.org. So I go to programs, I go to immigration.
Yeah. And so, and you scroll down and you can read about our work, the YES program, which is the program I led. If you're a high school or college student and you're interested in getting more involved, definitely go out and check YES, because all are welcome. Yeah, so it's a group for high school and college age students who want to work to educate and inform others about our outdated immigration system. We also have someone come into your community and to give like an immigration 101. If you scroll all the way down the website, right there where you says invite yes leaders to speak at your group, please fill the form out here. You can fill out the form and request to have a yes member come and share their story and talk about our outdated immigration system and what could you do at that moment to better the situation for undocumented immigrants living in the U.S.
Okay, great. So you can bring people to your parishes or to your schools or community to help educate other people. So there are a lot of people. And then, of course, when they do that, they will know what's happening at that moment.
This past school year, we actually reached 2,000 people.
In Cincinnati, obviously, the Cincinnati area.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, Cincinnati area. So we're very busy. So if you are very interested, please book us as soon as you can so we have you on your calendar and we don't get any backlog.
And you might be the speaker yourself, perhaps, as well.
Unfortunately, no, because I will be moving in August to DC.
Oh, that's right.
But you might have the opportunity to actually listen to my youngest sister, Karina, who just became a member because she's now a high school sophomore. And so she just got done with her training. So she's ready to go out and share her story at these events. So you might get her.
So that's a good start. What else can we do?
Right. Definitely call your representatives and legislators, send them letters, and do research on what they are doing and what is their stance on immigration. And make sure that you as their constituents want them, while they're in D.C., to better the situation for undocumented immigrants here in the U.S.
I think right now that there are often different bills that are being presented at state levels and federal levels. It's always changing, right?
And that will be another 1 hour conversation that we could have about me telling you all the craziness that has happened since September 5th of last year when President Trump decided to end DACA.
Right. Okay. So contact your legislators. I'm sure that IJPC or similar organizations in whatever community you're in would know what the current bills and legislative things are.
And our website, you can also sign up for our emailing list so you can get email alerts about what is currently happening, things that are moving very rapidly. And that's the thing about immigration. Sometimes movement is very slow, but all of a sudden it gets really fast and everything is changing in hours. So sign up for our email list and you can get news alerts to like call your representative, call your legislator right now. Or it could be there's these current bills that are happening and we're trying to get these people to co-sign it or whatever. Many different things and also different events that we hold. We have a learning community for folks who want to learn more about immigration and they talk about different topics. I believe the last one was learning about unaccompanied minors. And right now, if you haven't been keeping up with immigration news, they're a big deal right now and they're all over the news. So what is causing that and why is there a backlash at the border right now with unaccompanied minors?
So besides going to the IJBC website and contacting your legislators about things that are happening currently, what's another thing that we can do to help out?
Please go out and do research. Research about what is currently happening and how our immigration system is outdated. The research and all the information is out there online. And also I encourage everyone to make sure that their research is unbiased and factual, because it feels like right now in our time, whether something is a fact or an opinion is kind of blurry. And the more informed you are, the best you can do to help the movement, honestly.
Right. Jose, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Do you have anything else that you feel like we didn't cover that you want to say to people to change misunderstandings that people might have of undocumented immigrants or whatever it might be?
Yeah, this is so passionate that I could spend another hour talking to you about this, but I will say just one last thing. The situation about the unaccompanied minors at the border right now. These people are escaping, in a sense, countries that are war-torn. Countries that have a higher homicide rate than many countries in the Middle East and anywhere else in the world. These kids and families, They want a better life. They're not here to take anyone's jobs. They're not even here to obtain DACA. They're just here trying to live a better life. Please do the research and understand the situations they're coming from.
They're coming from neighborhoods whose violent crime rates are higher than other areas of the world that are actually war-torn.
The majority of the Central American countries are in the top 5 of the highest homicide rates in the whole world.
Including violent war places like Syria, for example.
Yes. Afghanistan, Iraq.
Iraq and Afghanistan. It's higher than those places. That's almost impossible to believe. Yet this is what people are escaping from. That and the complete economic hopelessness drives people to these very difficult choices of trying to come into the United States just so that they can have some kind of semblance of a life, that there's just no hope to stay where they are. Anything else you think needs to be said while we're here?
I've heard in many cases a lot of women and young girls say it's better to get raped while trying to cross the border once than being a sex slave in your native country to gangs.
Wow.
I've heard other people say it's better almost dying trying to get across the border than dying in your own native country.
Wow. That perhaps sheds a little bit of light on the harsh reality of people's lives that brings them to try to find some hope across the border in the United States, whatever's helping them. I hope that your story touches people and that people get a better understanding of some of the reasons why some people might be here undocumented in the United States for the reasons of escaping violence, escaping dire economic situations, escaping inability to take care of a child that has certain medical or developmental issues or questions like that they won't be able to do in their home country, being uninformed about what would happen. Like you go across documented and not realizing what's going to happen when your visa expires. And now you're here and you didn't know this was going to happen. And hopefully we can inspire people to get involved and educate themselves about what the real plight is of so many undocumented immigrants. And maybe we can change the laws and create pathways. You know, we're not trying to skip the pathway. We're trying to create one that doesn't currently exist. Okay. Well, thank you, Jose, for your time. It was great meeting you and speaking with you, and I hope that we can sit down face to face before you go to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, anytime. Send me an email for sure. Let's get coffee. I would love that.
Yes, maybe we can make that happen. Okay, great. Thank you, Jose. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.